welcome to the Our World Heritage 2021 debate. 2021 debate is a year of events focused on protection, conservation, and management of world heritage. We want to uncover untold stories to broaden our views on heritage practices and future perspectives. Knowledge gathered this year will be published in 2022 on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the Convention. The Our World Heritage Initiative is created by individuals working on a 100% voluntary capacity. We would like to point out that Our World Heritage provides an open dialogue platform that is based on voluntary work from session organizers and speakers. Our World Heritage welcomes diverse viewpoints in the spirit of collegial debate where mutual respect is afforded to all. Please note that the expressed views do not necessarily reflect the official position of Our World Heritage. We thank today's speakers for telling their stories, and we thank you, the listeners, for your kind interest and questions. If you want to remain up to date on our activities, you can follow our social media. We maintain channels in multiple languages to break through the language barriers and connect to local communities. You will find all links on our website, ourworldheritage.org. Thank you for being with us today, and we wish you a very fruitful event.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be around the world. Welcome to our session of the Our World Heritage Sustainability Debate. This session is called From the Regional to the Global Approach, Case Studies Plenary Discussion. I would like to thank, as moderator of the session and a coordinator of the Our World Heritage Sustainability Debate, all our speakers who are with us today and all our attendees joining us as well. And a special thanks to our wonderful Our World Heritage team who is making all of this possible. Jana Chowdhury, our rapporteur, Lucia Pessi, our co-organizer, Ruben Pessi, our co-convener, Maria Virginia Avila, who's with us today, and many others in our team. It's wonderful to be here again today. I would also actually extend a special thanks to all of the case studies applicants or proponents who have provided the reflections, the information, the discussions about the case studies that we're going to discuss today. They come from all around the world. Our presenter, Lucia, will give us more details on this, and some of them are with us today as representatives of the different regions and types of World Heritage sites and tentative list sites that we're discussing. And before going on to the concept of our session in a little bit more detail, where I will share my screen for you, I would also like to make a couple of logistics announcements. We have interpretation, Spanish, English today. We are recording the session. We're also streaming live on YouTube on the Our World Heritage channel. We have a Q&A question and answer chat box where we would welcome your questions, and we would also welcome your comments in general in the chat box. Here are some of our social media accounts if you'd like to follow Our World Heritage initiatives, activities, and a few words on the concept of today. As many of you by now know, the Our World Heritage Initiative seeks to renew the spirit of the World Heritage Convention, which is approaching its 50th anniversary. We see challenges and risks, and this is a very special convention that we want to safeguard and make sure that the world's wonderful, precious sites are protected for the future sustainably. And as sustainability being our debate theme, we have embraced the slogan, let's say, to be sustainable, development processes should fully reflect the contribution of heritage conservation. And there was a special in-depth project, the case studies project, at the center of our team's work. And we invited stakeholders to submit their case studies illustrating the challenges and solutions for integrating heritage and sustainable development. Of course, aligning ourselves with UNESCO's World Heritage and Sustainable Development Policy and Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development, centering around people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnerships, of course, which we should also note. So we will be presenting the outcomes, which have been a culmination of a long process, many months of work today. And then we will be discussing them with some representatives of case studies, guest experts, and also special guests, diplomats and advisory body representatives, ICOMOS, IUCN, and ICROM today with you. So thank you very much once again to everybody. And here is a very quick look at our speakers, our diverse, eminent speakers of today. Sorry, here I went too fast. So we, our moderator and rapporteur is at your service as well. Just a quick word on the moderator and rapporteur. I'm an urban planner from Turkey who's been working on heritage and urbanism and sustainability during my career. Very, very lucky to be coordinating this debate this month, together with my rapporteur, wonderful Jana Das Chowdhury, heritage expert, architect, who has founded a new Institute of Heritage Research after leaving her public servant position onto new horizons. Very happy to work with her. And I'm introducing here Ruben Pessi from the outset, because he was going to have the last word today and we might get too excited and not have enough time then. So here is Ruben's biography for you. He's a pioneer, a recognized thought leader in Latin America, founder of the CEPA Foundation and president of the Latin American Network of Environmental Sciences. And he's also the co-convener, as we said, of OWH Sustainability. So after introducing some of our team members, now I'm moving on to introduce our first speaker, Lucia Pessi, who is also a co-convener of our sustainability debate. She's a PhD candidate in urbanism, Master in Sustainable Development, and Executive Vice President and Academic Coordinator of FLACAM, again with Ruben. She's also the Vice President of the CEPA Foundation and Technical Secretary of the Chair in Sustainability Policies, UNLP, among many other things that you can see here, but I cannot go through them because of time constraints here. And I will stop sharing and go on later to introduce everybody in the same way. So you will bear with me sharing my PowerPoint once in a while. But now it's time for us to listen to Lucia as she presents the case studies outcomes. Muchas gracias, Lucia. Go ahead.
Muchas gracias, muy buenas tardes y gracias, Ege, sobre todo. Voy a compartir mi pantalla como corresponde. Ahí está, vamos a comenzar entonces. Bueno, muy buenas tardes y gracias, Ege. Quiero ante todo saludar a quienes nos acompañan hoy en esta sesión plenaria de debate, agradecer la participación de los responsables de los estudios de caso, que son los verdaderos protagonistas de este proceso, también a Susan y a Juliana y al Vino desde ya, y especialmente a la embajadora Helen, a Gabriel, Nabek y Rohit, que enriquecerán seguramente este debate con su trayectoria y experiencia en este tema. Por último, no quiero dejar de agradecer también a Ege y a todo nuestro equipo por la confianza en elegirme para compartir con ustedes las conclusiones globales del proceso que hemos desarrollado hasta ahora. Como bien saben, el equipo de sustentabilidad de OWH ha realizado una convocatoria global para casos de estudio en febrero del 2021. Se recibieron 134 solicitudes y se seleccionaron 51 estudios de caso en una primera ronda que ejemplifican buenas prácticas, desafíos y oportunidades en la gestión sustentable de sitios patrimoniales. La convocatoria estuvo especialmente dirigida a sitios ya declarados Patrimonio de la Humanidad o que se encuentran en las listas tentativas nacionales. El objetivo era poner en marcha un proceso de autoevaluación colectiva, cualitativa y co-construcción de recomendaciones de políticas para mejorar la gestión sustentable del patrimonio mundial. Podían aplicar autoridades encargadas de la gestión del sitio, instituciones académicas, investigadores independientes, ONGs, entre otros. Buscamos la mayor diversidad e involucramiento de la sociedad civil y fundamentalmente escuchar a todas las partes interesadas. Como resultado de la convocatoria, entonces, se presentaron 134 casos de estudios de 50 países de 6 regiones. Esto también significa más de 150 participantes y 30 expertos involucrados en el proceso. Ciertamente, estamos muy felices de la gran receptividad de la iniciativa que demuestra la importancia del tema y el interés a nivel global. Dado el número y la calidad de las propuestas, decidimos no rechazar ninguna, por supuesto, y en cambio desarrollar el proceso de trabajo y autoevaluación en 2 rondas. La selección de aquellos casos para la primera ronda fue por voto anónimo por parte de los miembros del equipo de sustentabilidad y por ende absolutamente transparente y democrática, y basada fundamentalmente en lograr una alta representatividad geográfica y tipológica de casos. Se seleccionaron así 10 casos de estudio aproximadamente por región, todos sitios de patrimonio mundial o en las listas tentativas nacionales, tanto culturales, naturales como mixtos. En total participaron en esta primera ronda 51 casos de estudios de 35 países de 6 regiones. Los resultados que presentaré a continuación ilustran el trabajo desarrollado entonces en esta primera ronda por más de 70 participantes y 30 expertos invitados de las regiones mencionadas. Quiero presentarles a los verdaderos protagonistas, quienes asimismo no debemos olvidar representan a otros cientos de miles de protagonistas, que son las propias comunidades locales que habitan en los sitios y entornos de nuestros estudios de caso. Los casos seleccionados trabajaron intensamente en un proceso de autoevaluación y evaluación en profundidad en etapas, que permitió elaborar un diagnóstico fundamentalmente perceptivo y cualitativo a nivel regional y global. El proceso fue enriquecido con el desarrollo de 6 talleres regionales durante el mes de junio, 1 por cada región, en el cual participaron también expertos invitados regionales y desde ya los más de 30 participantes del equipo de sustentabilidad. Las sesiones de julio están contribuyendo a profundizar este diagnóstico, que será enriquecido también a partir de agosto, fecha a partir de la cual pondremos en marcha un proceso similar de análisis y autoevaluación como los más de 70 casos de estudio que esperan ansiosamente participar de la segunda ronda. Por ello quiero expresar que estas conclusiones no son concluyentes, sino un momento de reflexión en el camino que recién comienza y que esperamos sea una real contribución a la revisión de la Convención Mundial del Patrimonio en su 50 aniversario y a las políticas de manejo y gestión del patrimonio mundial. Les presentaré entonces, ahora sí, los resultados y conclusiones del proceso de autoevaluación de estudios de caso resultado de esta primera ronda. Primero quiero compartirles rápidamente una serie de datos que demuestran la riqueza y representatividad global de los estudios de casos seleccionados y por ende de las conclusiones que les presentaré en breve. El 80% de los sitios sitios de patrimonio mundial ya declarados y el 20% están en las listas tentativas nacionales. Están representadas todas las regiones del mundo en función de los estudios de casos recibidos. Y esta gráfica permite demostrar la representatividad de tipologías también lograda, hoy representada también en esta mesa de debate por Lijuan, Alessio y Lucy. Otro aspecto importante de destacar, como ya les anticipé, es la diversidad de miradas, ilustrada en esta diapositiva. Los casos fueron postulados principalmente por instituciones académicas e investigadores independientes, pero también por una buena representatividad de site managers, ONG, instituciones públicas y privadas, entre otras. Es interesante la respuesta dada a esta pregunta, pues el 75% de ellos se percibe como un paisaje cultural, a pesar de no pertenecer a esta categoría patrimonial propiamente dicha, salvo en algunos casos como el paisaje cultural cafetero o el paisaje cultural carioca en América Latina o el paisaje cultural mapungüe en Sudáfrica, por nombrar solamente algunos de los que participaron. Creo que nos habla de la importancia de la relación patrimonio y paisaje que se planteó en la sesión del 9 de julio junto a excelentes oradores colegas. En la misma línea, es interesante esta respuesta, que alude al concepto de conflicto, donde no quisimos hacer alusión directa al conflicto armado particularmente, para poner de manifiesto la importancia de otros tipos de conflictos, sociales, económicos, políticos, evidentes en los sitios de patrimonio mundial, tal como ha presentado también Pamela Durán en su presentación del 9 de julio y en las sesiones del 15 y 16 de este mes de debate. También me pareció muy importante compartir con ustedes que 4 de los estudios de caso presentados están también en la lista en peligro, como la antigua ciudad de Bosra, las tumbas de los reyes de Buganda en Kasubi o el valle del Kamandú. Creo que el reciente debate respecto a Liverpool y la pérdida de su condición de sitio de patrimonio mundial refleja aún más la importancia de poner atención en estos sitios y escuchar a sus protagonistas. Para desarrollar esta evaluación nos basamos en las 4 dimensiones del desarrollo sustentable: sustentabilidad ambiental, desarrollo social inclusivo, desarrollo económico inclusivo, paz, seguridad y gobernanza, que hemos tomado como referencia, claro está, del documento de política para la integración de una perspectiva de desarrollo sostenible en los procesos de la Convención del Patrimonio Mundial, adoptado por la Asamblea General de Estados Partes en la Convención del Patrimonio Mundial en su 22ª sesión, con el matiz de la gobernanza. Sobre la base de este documento, el equipo de sustentabilidad desarrolló una serie de criterios e indicadores cualitativos en forma de patrones a analizar en los estudios de caso en forma de autoevaluación por parte de los postulantes. El documento de política fue, por supuesto, esencial, aunque incorporamos algunos aportes que consideramos importantes a los ojos del equipo de sustentabilidad. En esta imagen pueden verse claramente las 4 dimensiones y 26 criterios elaborados y propuestos en el formulario guía de autoevaluación que los estudios de caso han completado en muchos casos en articulación, vale decir, con los gestores de sitio y partes interesadas. Cada criterio se expresó como una pregunta y se describió conceptualmente para establecer un terreno común con nuestros solicitantes. Parametrizamos los datos proporcionados y los analizamos en consecuencia. Se preguntaron aspectos tales como el nivel de protección de la diversidad biológica, el fortalecimiento de la resiliencia a los riesgos ambientales y al cambio climático, el impacto del turismo, la presión del desarrollo urbano. Para evaluar el desarrollo social inclusivo, se analizaron dimensiones tales como la inclusión, la equidad social y la diversidad cultural, el desarrollo del capital social, la promoción de los derechos humanos, el empoderamiento de la mujer y la conservación del patrimonio intangible. Para evaluar el desarrollo económico inclusivo, nos preguntamos cuáles eran los patrones reconocibles que pudieran expresar el nivel de desarrollo endógeno, tales como las estrategias o acciones puestas en marcha o no de construcción de capacidades, el nivel de emprendimiento, la promoción de la economía circular o el nivel de distribución de los beneficios en manos de las comunidades locales. Por último, y del mismo modo, se construyeron una serie de indicadores para evaluar la gobernanza, la paz y la seguridad, incluyendo la noción de prevención de conflictos, la transparencia, la garantía de derechos, así como la reconstrucción post-conflicto, que considero cada vez más importante frente al difícil escenario que ha supuesto el COVID y sus impactos en el mundo en general y en los sitios de patrimonio mundial en particular. Esta diapositiva permite quizás comprender mejor el alcance cualitativo de la propuesta. Los colores no expresan cantidades, sino el reconocimiento de patrones asociados a cada criterio, que permiten comprender mejor el nivel de alcance de cada criterio. Dicha gama de colores nos permite expresar de una manera más elocuente, creemos, los resultados regionales y globales, en este caso, en lo que llamamos mapa de colores. El color gris supone vacíos o falta de información y nos guía también hacia acciones en pos de una mayor investigación y profundización en esta línea. El color rojo, claro está, nos alerta sobre preocupaciones y nos permite reconocer situaciones que abordar con urgencia. El color amarillo, claro, nos muestra una intención a modificar los patrones de insustentabilidad, una tendencia, pero aún falta mucho camino por recorrer. El color naranja expresa que algo se ha hecho, pero no se ha logrado o no se ha implementado correctamente. El color verde claro nos dice que la política existe, por ejemplo, pero que se implementa parcialmente. Y por último, el color verde expresa las buenas prácticas desarrolladas en muchas de las dimensiones analizadas. Poniendo un poco
Lucia,
la lupa, ¿sí?
Lucia, pardon, sorry, the English interpretation disappeared. Would you mind giving us a few seconds to see if we can fix it? Sorry to interrupt you.
No, no problem.
Okay, let's just test the English. Hello,
Hello.
1, 2, 3. Now we can hear you, actually. I think the English
That's
channel
right.
came back.
Yes? ¿Estamos bien? That's right now? Yes, we can hear. Okay.
Lucia?
Let's go. Okay. Poniendo un poco la lupa en cada una de las dimensiones analizadas, ¿escuchan? Yes, ¿no?
Okay, very good.
That's okay.
I think we can continue.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Just a second. Yes. Poniendo un poco la lupa en cada una de las dimensiones analizadas, podemos compartir con ustedes algunos resultados nunca concluyentes. Un valor de esta metodología es su transparencia y carácter abierto, lo que supone poder profundizar y revisar continuamente los resultados, ajustarlos a la luz de los cambios, de los resultados de proyectos nuevos en marcha o de una mayor profundización del diagnóstico, e incluso monitorear en el tiempo estos cambios en el corto, mediano y largo plazo. Por ello, valoramos profundamente el proceso puesto en marcha, el debate que cada una de las preguntas ha suscitado en los postulantes y en los resultados en los estudios de caso, y desde ya asimismo en el propio equipo de sustentabilidad, y espero también en quienes nos están escuchando. En cuanto a la sustentabilidad ambiental, y como puede verse en el mapa de colores, predomina el color naranja, que expresa que existen acciones puestas en marcha en esta línea, pero aún no se han implementado completamente. Y fundamentalmente preocupa la presión del crecimiento urbano y la falta de planificación integral del sitio y su entorno. En el desarrollo social inclusivo, en el desarrollo social inclusivo, se visualizan claramente diferencias regionales, aunque el diagnóstico no es muy diferente a la dimensión anterior. Los resultados demuestran que en la mayoría de los casos y regiones, la administración del sitio ha planificado actividades para promover la creación de capacidad, la enculturación y el desarrollo del capital social, pero aún no se han implementado. Y preocupan factores como la falta de empoderamiento femenino y la igualdad de género, o el débil o nulo involucramiento en la administración del sitio de los pueblos autóctonos y comunidades nativas. En cuanto al desarrollo económico inclusivo, el diagnóstico expresa una situación más preocupante. La implementación de estrategias de economía circular o naranja es muy baja o nula, así como se manifiestan dificultades para garantir la distribución de ingresos en beneficios de las comunidades locales. No voy a detenerme en esta diapositiva y en el concepto de conflicto, pues fue presentado con bastante profundidad por Pamela en otras sesiones, pero sí quiero reforzar la falta de información o debilidad en general en la dimensión de riesgo y el manejo de conflictos en los planes de manejo, de los sitios de patrimonio mundial. Por supuesto, las generalidades nunca son buenas y hay grandes excepciones, claro está, pero la tendencia demuestra como mínimo debilidades en esta línea. En cuanto a la gobernanza, en cambio, se evidencia en general la existencia de políticas más horizontales e incluyentes en esta línea, aunque aún su implementación está lejos de lo deseable, claro está. Pero antes de compartir finalmente con ustedes los desafíos y fortalezas que hemos identificado a nivel global en cada una de las dimensiones antes mencionadas, quiero recordar el gran trabajo que los estudios de caso han aportado, no solo a través del formulario de autoevaluación, sino también en sus informes de evaluación en profundidad y los workshops regionales, en los cuales nos han compartido, si las hubiera, por supuesto, las estrategias implementadas con éxito y sus buenas prácticas. Repasemos ahora sí los desafíos y fortalezas que hemos reconocido a nivel global a través de todo este proceso. Advierto que las siguientes diapositivas tendrán mucho texto, pero decidí hacerlo así para salvar la barrera del idioma en la grabación de esta sesión, porque lamentablemente la traducción al inglés no queda grabada, así que al menos que nos quede el texto. Repasemos entonces. En cuanto a la sustentabilidad ambiental, los desafíos son políticas de sustentabilidad débiles o ausentes, falta de planificación, implementación y monitoreo urbano territorial integral, falta de normas e instrumentos para frenar el desborde urbano, tendencia a la gentrificación, masificación del turismo y sus impactos sobre el patrimonio, falta de desarrollo e implementación de estrategias y políticas de cambio climático, ausencia de la gestión de riesgos en los planes de manejo, falta de articulación de políticas de biodiversidad entre los estados, perturbación antropogénica, sobre todo en las zonas núcleo, alto impacto de actividades contaminantes o de la explotación de recursos, o débil implementación, por ejemplo, de sistemas de gestión integral de residuos. Se visualizan, en cambio, fortalezas interesantes, como la creciente incorporación de la visión contextual y del paisaje, la creciente conciencia sobre el papel del medio ambiente, las técnicas de construcción tradicionales, la existencia de experiencias exitosas de rehabilitación del patrimonio a nivel local. En cuanto al desarrollo social inclusivo, los desafíos son falta de herramientas y canales para garantizar la transparencia de datos, la debilidad en las estrategias y herramientas tales como la incorporación de las comunidades, la generación de empleo, el empoderamiento, entre otros. La débil incorporación, como ya dijimos, de las comunidades autóctonas en la planificación, manejo y gestión. La accesibilidad universal no está garantizada y consideramos que es muy importante. Y por supuesto hay que seguir trabajando en la valorización de los intangibles. La vulnerabilidad ante el impacto del COVID-19 y la necesidad de planes especiales de emergencia post-pandemia cada vez me parece más importante en el contexto actual. Y la necesidad de profundizar en el diálogo y el respeto, por supuesto, y reconocimiento de los saberes y cosmogonías de las comunidades autóctonas, o la necesidad de promover, por supuesto, la educación patrimonial. Las fortalezas identificadas son la apropiación de la participación como una metodología, la creciente conciencia de género, la conciencia social sobre el papel de los sitios de patrimonio mundial, el incremento del voluntariado del compromiso social, los movimientos feministas y la creciente implementación de modalidades de abajo hacia arriba, como así también la creciente valorización del patrimonio intangible, el respeto de los saberes y la valorización creciente del patrimonio arqueológico. En el desarrollo económico inclusivo, los desafíos reconocidos a nivel global son debilidades tales como el fortalecimiento de la cadena de valor, la economía ecológica, la distribución de la renta, la necesidad de reforzar la incorporación de las mujeres y los jóvenes a las actividades económicas asociadas al patrimonio, las relaciones desequilibradas entre las partes interesadas, el turismo, que muchas veces se manifiesta como una cultura monoeconómica en los sitios de patrimonio mundial, la falta de profesionalización y formalización del sector, y muchas veces, y sobre todo en América Latina y en África, una fuerte dependencia a los organismos de cooperación internacional. Pero también tenemos fortalezas en esta línea, como la existencia de experiencias exitosas en los sitios de patrimonio mundial asociadas a modos de vida locales, el crecimiento del turismo sustentable en todas sus tipologías, el creciente apoyo también de los organismos de cooperación internacional en las temáticas del patrimonio y la existencia de buenas prácticas de economía naranja, bionegocios o similar, lideradas por las propias comunidades y para su propio beneficio. En cuanto a la seguridad, la paz y gobernanza, y ya vamos terminando, se presentan como desafíos los que siguen: la falta de articulación intersectorial e interjurisdiccional, la falta de coordinación efectiva entre múltiples agencias y partes interesadas, la necesidad de instalar la sustentabilidad del patrimonio como una política pública, la débil articulación, muchas veces, entre sector privado, público, académica y la sociedad civil, la falta de una visión territorial en los planes de manejo y gestión de sitios y en las zonas de amortiguación y transición, y muchas veces también la falta de voluntad política. También falta reforzar el Estado de Derecho en todas sus dimensiones, la falta de espacios de diálogo, la necesidad de incorporar el concepto de conflicto, como ya dijimos, y la falta de capacitación muchas veces de indicadores y patrones de desarrollo sustentable en la gestión de los sitios, y lamentablemente también la burocracia. Algunas de las fortalezas identificadas Son la tendencia a una gestión integral y a la gobernanza pública-privada, el trabajo en red y nuevos instrumentos como los laboratorios, los observatorios, el reconocimiento, afortunadamente, de la importancia de las alianzas para alcanzar los objetivos, la existencia de novedosas prácticas de reestructuración administrativa, experiencias de buenas prácticas de investigación, aprendizaje colectivo y cogestión en los sitios de patrimonio mundial, y finalmente la existencia de habilidades y redes de profesionales con capacidades para una gestión más sustentable del patrimonio, como creo que es justamente la iniciativa global OWH. Y por último, y transversal a todas las dimensiones, queremos destacar que existen muchas buenas prácticas en los sitios del patrimonio en todo el mundo, pero persisten también desafíos. Dos recomendaciones nos gustaría enfatizar. Necesitamos trascender la visión sectorial, natural y cultural y objetual, tangible e intangible, y propender hacia una visión contextual, integral y holística de la indispensable relación patrimonio y paisaje. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Lucia. That was great, excellent, and good use of time. And sorry about the interruption. We still did quite well with time. I guess everybody had a very good overview of the whole process. It was a complicated, long, but very fruitful process. Now, without taking up too much time, I would like to just state that the first main section of our session is now over with the presentation. Now we're moving on to the second part, which is in the form of a round table. We wanted to keep it a little bit flexible also for maybe more interactive reflections. I'm going to share my screen again for you. So going on to the round table, yesterday, actually, at short notice, I don't know how much these questions were taken on board at the last minute, but we shared a few guiding questions with our panelists. We have case studies representatives here. How did the experience of participating in this project affect you, beneficial, or what critiques can you say, new things learned? For our guest experts, what trends can you observe across the regions? For our guests, ambassador and advisory bodies, how useful can such a case study project be for advancing implementation of the World Heritage and Sustainable Development Policy and the Convention at large? Also keeping in mind that at the moment, the World Heritage Committee session is ongoing in Fuzhou, China, and online as well. And we see many interesting debates, controversies as well. And for everybody, how can we take such case study projects forward to improve policy and practice, and what recommendations can you give us to take the work further? Apologies, I stopped sharing. I should go on. So we are inviting our panelists to think about and maybe reflect on these questions. And I will introduce our first panelist, who is one of the three representative case study applicants or proponents we have. We try to have it regionally and typologically representative. So Alessio Re kindly submitted a case for Genoa, le strade nuove, and the system of the Palazzi dei Rolli. So that's a European case study represented by an NGO academic and a cultural site. Alessio is an architect, PhD with an MA in cultural economics. He's an expert in cultural heritage and economic development, having worked with Vulture Sant'Agata. Then he was a Secretary General of the Sant'Agata Foundation. He teaches as adjunct professor at the University of Turin and the University of Pisa, also a consultant and many, many other roles. So you can just have a quick look here. I won't take too much time to read them all. But now we can hear Alessio's reflections on his case study experience with us. So we have about 7 minutes per panelist to make the session's time. So just reminding you to be aware of the time. Thank you. Grazie mille. Go ahead, Alessio.
Thank you, Ege. Thank you all. Hello to everybody. It's a pleasure to share this.
Are you muted? No, but
no.
We cannot hear you.
You hear me? Can you? Hello, hello.
Alessio, just a second. I think we have a problem hearing you. Could you maybe check your audio settings? Oh, you can hear him? Okay.
Hello.
I can also hear.
Okay, can you?
Oh, that's me with the interpretation. Apologies. Please go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. You have to unmute the original sound. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So I was simply saying thank you, hello, and thank you for inviting me to this very interesting session. I mean, thank you, Lucia, for what you presented, and thank you all for the work. It's a kind of work we all need. In 6 minutes, because I already lost my first one. Yes, I was trying to contribute to these sessions, presenting, introducing, commenting. A case study on which I've been working and I'm still working, which is the Genoa, where there is a site, which is to me, not because I'm working on that, but it's really something that looks extremely promising. Just to summarize the case study, it was inscribed into the World Heritage List in 2009. So the first management plan was made, drafted in 2009. In 2019, after 10 years, and I leave to you the reflections about this, it was done the update, the new management plan, which was fully inspired and guided by the international guidelines, the global report, the HUL. I mean, you know all these references. This was a very demanding but very positive exercise. Last year, 2020, we started together with the new management authority, which is the municipality. We started the process of implementing the management plan. And today, in 2021, we are really understanding what kind of instrument we do need to make these, I mean, the goals drafted into the management plan happen, and happen with producing a good, an evident, a relevant and positive impact on the city. So the reflection is how to make this work. And we are preparing an instrument which basically is something that we aim for matching the heritage things with the other policies of the municipality, the main policies adopted by the municipality, which are basically the ones working towards improving the city resilience. Genova is a pretty paradigmatic city for this topic, and the policies related to the blue economy, being Genoa one of the most important port city in Italy and in all the Mediterranean. And we are preparing an instrument which at the moment is called the Rolli. Rolli is the name of the palaces of the World Heritage Site, Rolli Lab. What is this? It is a mix of capacity building for the local stakeholders, but also for other stakeholders, and a call for ideas for the local, again, stakeholders, but also the international ones, and the transfer of all these towards a constant updating of the management plan. In other words, this is a very draft description because it's a work that we are doing right now. But in other words, the point is, okay, we do have a management plan, we do have a management authority, we do have everything that formally we need, but still the question is how to make sustainability, because this is the goal, to become something very concrete. Because sustainability must be today something concrete. And we know, we are convinced that heritage, cultural heritage can contribute to sustainability if and only if all the efforts made for managing heritage are made for the society, not for heritage itself, for the people. And to try possibly to contribute to solve or improve the problems of the people. I'm convinced about this. If we still look at the heritage itself, we would never probably achieve the goal of make something sustainable. And this is also to answer one of the questions that, not answer, but try to, one of the questions that you posed. Sustainable heritage management. I don't know if this is if I would have formulated in this way. It's heritage management, and to be sustainable, it means that it must contribute to the overall sustainability, so to the community, to the people living there. And a very last consideration, since my time is almost over, is that making this also means, in our experience, to be able to measure the capacities of the local context. Because for being concrete, we know that we cannot do everything. So we really must be able to measure what is feasible or not. And of course, this doesn't mean that we have to ignore the possibility to improve the local capacity. But sustainability now, in this case especially, shows how it must be extremely fitting with the question by the people, questions which are very quick in timing, and very concrete in problems. Today, since I work for an NGO, I can tell you that most, if not all, the demands that we receive for assistance are asking for something. I mean, they ask to us, help us in making our strategies, our management, our plans, to make them happen, to make them very concrete. Otherwise, we cannot achieve, we cannot comply with our mission. So these are my reflections. I hope to have managed well the timing. Thank you again, and I'm gonna listen my colleagues and friends as well.
That was perfect, Alessio. Thank you so much. You even had a little bit more time, but anyway, really important points you made for us. Really good setting the scene about making sustainability and concrete, and how we need to think about society, not just heritage itself, and look beyond maybe our traditional paradigms. So thank you very much for these reflections. So now I will show the screen for our next case study representative today. We have a Latin America region representative and academic who submitted a natural site, the Huascaran National Park, Li Yuan Qian. Let me share full screen with you. Qian Li Yuan received her PhD degree in visual communication in architecture and design, landscape restoration and monitoring from the Department of Architecture Representation and Visual Analysis, School of Architecture of Barcelona, Universitat Politécnica de Catalunya in 2017. She's also done an international PhD on landfill restoration in Portugal. She's an assistant professor at the landscape department at Southwest Jiao Tong University in Chengdu, China. Her research interests include natural heritage protection, ecosystem management, monitoring and defense, and she has many memberships, including one in the IUCN Commission on Protected Areas. So very accomplished case study proponent again with us, Li Yuan. I will stop sharing and give the floor to you. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, H. And hello, everybody. Today is so meaningful for case study applications. And I, as one of the applications, and I will share some strong feeling from two questions. And one is what appearance I affected. OWH team make 4 criteria in the self-assessment process, such as environmental sustainability, inclusive social development, inclusive economical development, and governance. I'm a researcher good at flood assessment by remote sensing on the natural heritage site. I'm almost only focused on the technology to solve the problem on the environmental sustainability. I need to pay more attention on these left 3 criteria in the future, which will help to better engage in ground-to-ceiling talks with governments and indigenous peoples, and to take practical measures. From the opposite side, The other case study necessarily pay more attention on the technology to keep the environmental sustainabilities. Now I back China. I'm in the China and in Chengdu, a mountain city, and I continue do flood research on another site named Gongga Mountain Natural Reserve, which is one of the 25 biodiversity hotspots in the world. Its topography is really similar with Wanas National Park. And this natural reserve downstream town will be suffered heavy flood every summer during the next 10 years. At the same time, we know now China and Germany are suffering the flood. The demand for efficient and accurate real-time technology such as the remote sensing is increasing urgently. Facing the extreme climate happening frequently, we really need to interdisciplinary cooperation, whatever nature with history or technology with theory. And I will also share my strong feeling with my second question. Answer the second question is about what recommendations for the OWH team. Cause of the question about what need me submit the to the OWH case study application. Because during my PhD study in Spain, I found the Wanas National Park is a World Heritage. However, suffered almost 70 years. It haven't been in the list of World Heritage in danger. I'm attracted by the goal of OWH and is to create policy recommendations to improve the sustainable management of World Heritage. So finally, I'm here and I'm talking to everybody and sharing the feeling with you. Now, I'm as one of the case study representatives, eagerly and sincerely recommending OWH team, please show our case study and synthesis outcomes to the World Heritage Center and the case site government urgings that will make the OWH and our goal come true. Yes, thank you. Muchas gracias. Yeah.
Muchas gracias to you too, Leo Anke, Xie, I could say maybe. And you finished earlier than allocated, so that gives us more time, but maybe we come back in the Q&A. Thank you for the very interesting points you made for us and some recommendations also. You actually go directly to recommend very specifically to put your site in the World Heritage List in danger. And you would like us to show this result to the World Heritage Center. So this connects us to the session going on right now, how independent community voices are still trying to access more of the decision-making in World Heritage. Very interesting, and also interdisciplinarity. Thank you for making these points. Now, and I would like to go to our third case study representative, but unfortunately she has not been able to join us today so far. We have been trying to reach her, but I will still acknowledge her today because of the case study that she submitted. Dr. Lucy Mandela submitted the Kakamega tropical forest in Kenya. So this was a representative of the Africa region from an academic, and it was a mixed site. So that would have completed the trilogy of the 3 types of sites for us. She's a senior lecturer and researcher at the Masinda Muliro University of Science and Technology. But I think since she's not here with us today, I should not really spend too much time on our third case study, and we can move on. Maybe if she manages to come back late, come join us later, we can give the floor to her, and we should move on to our next panelist in this case, which would be one of our guest experts, and one of our own, our World Heritage Sustainability Debate team member, Susan Ross, has also been kindly coordinating the North America region in the case studies project. And she's done a very thoughtful and a brilliant job of looking in depth into one of the sites. We had less representations in the North American site, but one site we had an opportunity to go in depth. So thank you for leading the way in that. Susan is an associate professor in the School of Indigenous and Canadian Studies at Carleton University, Ottawa, Canada. She's worked as an architect in, you can see, many different cities, a senior conservation architect in that federal government as well. She's an expert member at ICOMOS, also the Association for Preservation Technology, co-chair of the National Roundtable on Heritage Education, and published widely with different research interests, including the Journal of Cultural Heritage Management. So you can read a little bit of the details. I won't read them all. So Susan is here today with us to share reflections on the whole case studies experience. Thank you. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Okay, good. Hello, bonjour, Kwekwe. My name is Susan Ross, and I'm speaking from Ottawa, Canada, in the unceded territory of Algonquin Anishinaabe peoples, Miigwech. Through this acknowledgement of lands, waters, and peoples where I live, I also hope to draw attention to the heritage and rights of self-determination of Indigenous peoples in all the places today's events will reach. Thanks to everyone attending for your interest, and to Lucia, Ege, Yana, and of course, all of the other wonderful members of our World Heritage Sustainability team who have been working really tirelessly to make this month's events a success and to create the case studies as a legacy. So after wearing a couple of hats in this process, today as part of broader analysis, I would highlight that I use case studies methods extensively for teaching sustainable heritage conservation and planning at Carleton University. And the value of case studies for teaching is in exchange, but also includes in producing them. And as we have again just heard, this process has also been a learning mechanism for proponents. But beyond their value to the Our World Heritage Report for 2022, it's going to be important to create a lasting online resource where the case studies are documented and hopefully where new ones can be added. In addition to the values of the examples themselves, the methods of analysis and representation can be examined and shared long after this Sustainability Month. Some of the lessons to consider are about outcomes or evidence of best practices and challenges, but other lessons are more about process and new questions that have arisen. So getting more into an observation, if you like. Given the diversity of proponents already mentioned by Lucia, including from multiple disciplines and parts of the world, one might wish to read between the lines on whose voices these assessments reflect. The goal has always been to create a neutral assessment, not a judgment, but a systematic measure of achievements and gaps. However, it is possible that as part of this exercise, more explicit attention to identifying and mapping all the stakeholders involved in any site and their roles in quite often dissimilar forms of governance. So not just looking at actions and outcomes, but actors and networks could help add nuance to validate or qualify their results. It's not surprising also that several case studies came from academia. I think it was the highest percentage in the chart that Lucia showed. Approaches to knowledge exchange, creation and exchange can sometimes evolve more quickly or openly in universities and in some NGOs than in governments, consulting firms, or resource-poor communities. Many Our World Heritage Team members are themselves active in teaching and research, and this overall project is an opportunity for what you could call academic advocacy. Increased collaboration is one of the outcomes of this effort. So how can it, for example, expand roles for our graduate students in supporting sustainability research on world heritage that addresses really community-based and defined needs? Many of the cases have drawn attention to emerging or rising voices. This includes Indigenous voices, and so also the importance of self-determination and ongoing decolonization to achieving any type of sustainability. Given the focus on world heritage, the team's approach to assessment was rightly based on the analytical framework defined in the 2015 Policy on Integration of Sustainable Development in Processes of the World Heritage Convention, which is structured according to the 4, or if you like, 5-pillar approach, giving importance to people alongside planet, prosperity, and peace, and as we heard, also partnerships. One of the strengths of the policy is its explicit connections to the United Nations Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Indigenous worldviews provide alternate ways of conceptualizing sustainability, often underlining the relationship of sustainable practices to intangible cultural heritage, such as through language revitalization, or to nature-culture questions, such as through diverse forms of cultural landscape thinking. In the formal World Heritage Site context, looking beyond officially designated mixed sites for these perspectives is important. While trying to address the pillars through the 26 criteria, also implied has been the need to meet the 17 United Nations 2015-2030 Sustainable Development Goals. Going forward, the SDGs could be more explicit. It could, for instance, be useful to look for synergies between outstanding universal values and other more local values that are evidence of very specific sustainable practices. How are goals for land or water conservation achieved through diverse nature-culture perspectives? A certain amount of criticism now exists about how pillars or goals are often attended to in silos and by different actors. How are specific challenges within each grouping or single goal affecting all the others? Can there really be environmental stewardship without peace and fair governance, or without local capacity building through education, employment, and equitable access to services? The data in the questionnaires developed for assessment will be a useful starting point to consider these goal-specific issues, as well as those that help connect multiple goals and pillars. Within sustainable development practices, localization or ensuring capacity of local communities is considered key. This international exchange on case studies has, however, demonstrated the ongoing importance of regional and global discussions. International or global analysis and discussions provide important context for very specific kinds of issues. Discussions beyond boundaries can help build critical needed connections. This includes, for instance, for sites that cross international boundaries, or sites that are in conflict, or areas under intense global development pressures. In particular, the relationships between regions are important to consider around issues that arise from mass tourism or resource extraction, both having been identified as major sustainability issues in many cases, and both closely connected to rapid urban development. We need to pay attention to political economies that connect the countries producing tourists and profiting from mining, and that may have more resources for their own World Heritage sites, while addressing ongoing global inequities in the World Heritage system. How to shift the balance while not repeating patterns of colonization. Now, speaking from my own context, I am more aware than ever that education about World Heritage in Canada should not just focus on our sites, but also how our governments, corporations, and individual actions impact on World Heritage everywhere. Finally, the crisis of climate change has also highlighted that we need to think globally while acting locally. While we assume that sustainability is about mitigating climate change, more attention to climate change adaptation has been shown to be urgent in most sites. This may seem like one issue where rapidly developing expertise needs to educate and train those that will be most affected. However, this must also be a time to reflect on how to co-produce strategies instead of imposing top-down approaches. In this regard, the dialogues with lessons from local heritage places and actors that are not World Heritage sites, who may already have begun to implement many useful strategies for us to consider for World Heritage sites, will also be essential. So thanks again for the chance to be part of this discussion.
Thank you, Susan. So many great points made. I didn't know which one to highlight to respond. Thank you very much. Maybe just to appreciate your points on this being a legacy, and all the global interconnections that we've been experiencing are really exciting and valuable. So thanks again. In which case we are then going to hear from our other guest expert who will be a panelist today, also from our World Heritage Sustainability Debate team, Juliana Strogan, who is a conservator and heritage manager and an MA in World Heritage and Cultural Projects for Development from the University of Torino, also a Bachelor in Conservation from the Istituto Politecnico de Tomar. Many years of experience. She's currently the site manager at the World Heritage Site Rjukan Notodden Industrial Heritage in Norway. and she's coordinating many stakeholders, and she's been very active in highlighting the interconnected and stakeholder, let's say, worlds, looking macro broadly. So yes, she's also one of those people who see the big picture. I can just say a few words on my appreciation of her. And I think I will now pass the floor to Juliana to also share, who also actually was a case study applicant and also part of the evaluation. We were taking care not to do conflict of interest. She was not participating in things where she was being evaluated. No worries there. But anyway, you can say the rest of the story. Thanks.
Thank you, Ege. Thank you very much. Thank you very much also for the invitation. And of course, I echo every word Susan said about acknowledging the efforts that this initiative has been doing during this month of debates. It was, I'm very flattered for the invitation, of course. It was a surprise, but also a pleasure to contribute. Also because being a site manager, we in place identify many of the issues that we also were validating through the whole process, and it was such a learning curve to see that we are not alone first, and then and a second, all our issues, they have a theoretical background, they have larger issues that need to be solved before we go into the practical issues that we have, but not always this order is respected. So many times we are just lost in translation between solutions and identification of the real problems that we have. So I was very happy to be a part of the whole process and being also part of the regional workshops. I was co-coordinating the regional workshop for Africa, and it was a great pleasure to work with all the experts that we have been dealing with. And there also the case studies were extremely interesting. I have been also informed about the other regional workshops and have been a part of the European workshop as a participant. And from my standing point, that suddenly I have like many hats in my head, I was astonished to say that issues are transversal. So we have common issues in every region, and of course we have like specific issues in each region because we are different, and all the sites also will have their own issues and will be better at one thing and a little bit minus at the other. But we have overarching problems that has to be they have to be addressed by dialogue, and they have to be addressed not just by us, because many times at local level we don't have these answers. So going through a little bit about what I have experienced during this process, this month, we have been talking about trends and all this, what's happening in all the regions and all the World Heritage sites and tentative sites also. And we have very interesting cases, and we identified, for example, functional management issues in Africa, while at the same time they show a very large number of best practices in community participation. We also see immaterial heritage and a very small, like a smaller gap between the culture-nature divide. So we have to have their experience to implement at other places and to translate into other languages so we can use it at other continents and other regions. For example, gender and participation issues in Latin America, while at the same time they have a landscape and context, interpretation context, really high up at the best practice. We have, for example, in Europe, monitoring and development pressure issues, but very good interpretation and digital tools that they have been implementing. And for example, in Asia Pacific, we identified some risk preparedness situations, but at the same time, a huge implementation and increments in youth participation and best practices on that. So there is a whole dimension of best practices that we can take from each other, that we can go through. And what I identified, and this is a professional, just a professional opinion, I identified like overarching points that we should at least take into consideration when we are doing the final recommendations. And they would be that all of the regions and all of the sites, they need innovative circular economic models. We are not speaking now about reuse and readapted use. We are speaking about financing, and we are speaking how income and revenue from visitation, for example, can secure conservation of the sites. Too much of the income that comes from visitation, for example, is widespread and directed to other means than not the conservation and mitigation of the visitation, how do you say, disguise of the sites. But also we need, and this I'm seeing that we have already research practice teams, and I would say and comment that we have seen already that is an initiative coming that will ensure that we have research practice teams, because in practice what we need is we need to be informed, and we need to provide information that is clear enough to decision makers to base their decisions into research-based information. This is very important for us. We also need transparency and accountability. This is something very transversal to all the sites that we have been seeing, and we have a huge need of monitoring and digital tools and normative tools that give us a little bit of a common platform, so we can not just the periodic reporting as we have, and we still think that this is not enough. We need an interactive, ongoing monitoring platform that we need to put data in and check our own evolution. This, I think, it would be very positive for the sites. At the end, communication. And we need skills in communication. We need to communicate World Heritage a lot better than we do right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juliana. Another inspiring reflection. And I love the way you finish with communication, because that's also one of my big slogans in life. Everything needs better communication. And related to that, you talked about translating experiences across different places, countries, regions. And we really learn from each other. Peer learning really helps capacity building. Actually, at that point, I'd like to just take note that Juliana was also part of the World Heritage Site Managers Forum that took place just before the committee session. And that is also another platform that UNESCO has started, to connect site managers. It's similar to our case studies, except that we are more eclectic, not just site managers, but many different kinds of stakeholders. And thank you for the emphasis on innovative circular financing and the economic models. It comes down to money and how it circulates, and it is distributed in so many cases. So good to acknowledge that. Thank you very much. And moving on now to our next panelist, I will share her bio. Her Excellency Ambassador Helen Adiambo Guichuhi is with us today. She has been a very interesting member of the Our World Heritage Sustainability team. She has actually been following, observing our discussions, but I think it's very special to have a state party public servant with us. And she has very kindly accepted to join our discussion today. She did emphasize that she's joining in her personal capacity, not as her role as a deputy permanent delegate in the mission of Kenya to UNESCO. But I think she was always giving us some hints and some perspectives on the state party view. So I really appreciate that. In her bio, we see that she has led the Africa Group technical team at UNESCO to develop a resolution calling for the repatriation of stolen African artifacts. This is part of the whole decolonization movement around the world, we can say. Active member of the Sustainable Blue Economy Conference Secretariat, established a cultural diplomacy department at her Ministry of Foreign Affairs, also led negotiations and also High Commissioner for Kenya and South Africa, many different other roles. So here she is, and very lucky to have her Ambassador Helen with us. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very, very much. I hope you can hear me clearly. I am greatly honored to be in a group that seeks to conserve our heritage. Allow me to be as candid as possible in my contribution. Where I might sound offensive, please bear with me. It is my perspective. Allow me to play the devil's advocate. We have had the privilege of hearing of various local approaches, initiatives, and perspectives over the course of the various interventions made during the sessions. And the presentation by Lucia excellently summarized this. Likewise, from our various local and shared experiences and approaches, we have seen that we can rise not into one global approach, but rather a global melting pot of diverse approaches, with the aim being the protection, promotion, and enjoyment of our natural and cultural heritage sites. One global voice does not mean one size fits all, but rather working with singleness of purpose towards the same goal. I was requested to look at how useful a case study project can be towards advancing implementation of the UNESCO World Heritage and Sustainable Development Policy and the convention at large, especially in the context of the committee decisions and debates such as the ongoing 44th committee, which has created a lot of excitement. Allow me to speak from the perspective of a developing country because that's where my experience lies. You're all familiar with the inscription process and how resource intensive it is, both human and financial. You will also note that due to the cost, not many African countries have been able to complete the inscription process of their sites. When you examine the tentative list, the number of items for developing countries, it's quite astonishing. Some have been in the tentative list for more than 20 years. One may wonder, is it because they don't wish to inscribe? No, it is quite simple. Balancing development and inscribing sites are in competition for the same resources. No country would willingly destroy its heritage. So a number of sites have been inscribed and developing countries are grappling with their agenda, including conservation of heritage. And herein lies the nexus with what some experts call the politicization of the convention. I will remind you that even as countries develop, they always keep in mind the outstanding universal value which made a particular item worthy of inscription. Allow me to demonstrate this using the heritage sites I am familiar with before I advance what I see as lessons going forward. And I know I might take longer than the 7 minutes, so please bear with me. In Lamu, the community has deep ties with the historical town itself. This was one of the sites which was given forward. Same with the Kaya traditional site system. This is also another site which was discussed. And because of this great attachment, the community itself has come up with ways of preserving the sites. They understand the history, they know what to do, and sometimes we bombard them with terms such as the status of conservation. This leads into communication breakdown because of the terms used. In Lamu, yes, we have had a problem with some development in the sand dunes, but this was taken care of. To enable the community to have fresh water, the traditional jabias have been built as rain catchment areas. Some of the buildings are deteriorating. The ones which were left in pristine state, I hear the word pristine a lot from experts. The ones which have been left in pristine state have collapsed. The traditional way of repairing the houses is even more destructive because the process uses mangroves and takes almost 20 years to remove the salt out of the lime before use. So shouldn't our concern be what alternative method can be put in place to ensure the OUV of Lamu remains? You will recall Lamu's OUV features, namely the Swahili architecture, the Swahili social interactions, and the spatial planning are not threatened at the moment. However, we note that some experts are preoccupied with what might happen because of the port and a non-existent coal plant project, which was stopped by the courts. I think our energies should be reserved for mitigating measures instead of trying to stop development projects which do not interfere with the OUV of sites. What we call the speculative activism we witness time and time again is not helpful at all towards conservation. Currently, there's an evident problem with the burgeoning youth in Lamu. We accept that, it is true. Yes, there's an influx of motorcycle taxis. Instead of banning them as has been proposed and creating a bigger problem, we know there are plans to give them alternative sources of income that will contribute towards the conservation of Lamu. I'm aware that there are plans to open other touristic areas surrounding Lamu and have the youth man the places as well as be tour guides as an alternative income source. There are plans to have the youth engage more in planting mangroves as an alternative, and there are also plans to come up with an innovative way of renovating the houses, which are more than 1,000 years old, to be habitable again. All this takes money, and I am aware the government is engaged in raising funds for some of these activities, whose plans were at an advanced stage, but then the pandemic happened. There are also investigations to establish the viability of listing the art of coral plastering as an intangible cultural heritage so as to preserve it under the 2003 convention. Allow me to speak briefly about Turkana, which I'm very passionate about because this is what introduced me to the world of cultural heritage and all that. After working hard to ensure the waters of the lake do not recede any further, Mother Nature comes along and does its thing. The waters have expanded to the early 1900 levels. A study has been done by UNEP and it shows that the waters will increase further. So now that Mother Nature has done its thing, are we perhaps going to shout to have it removed from the danger listing as we did to have it unlisted? An expert team advised that the animals eaten by the surrounding community be reintroduced and that donkeys which have used the paths through the park for years be removed. While most of the targets are under implementation, honestly speaking, some social economic intelligence would have really helped achieve the intended outcomes faster. Let us remember the inscribed OUV for Turkana was Southern Island, Central Island, and Sibiloe National Park. Here comes the Lapset project and the band lamenting about a road that is planned for about 100 kilometers from the southern tip of the lake, and then enters the argument that the power lines will kill the birds. Surely, these birds migrate from Europe every year, where there are more power lines up there. And we have learned to avoid these lines. In Europe, is it in Africa they will forget and die en masse as they proceed to the south of Africa? The next point, I really hesitated to talk about it because I didn't want to create angst in the panelists, but I think it is an important one to the diplomats because they talk about it a lot of times. So when it comes to the reactive monitoring missions, and I've spoken about this personally severally at UNESCO meetings, Africa does not have a shortage of experts, really. Why then does it seem as though we are given, for want of a better word, rosy-eyed experts who do not understand the African culture, who sometimes seem as though they do not understand that our tangible heritage is irrevocably tied to our intangible heritage. Most sites in Africa happen to be natural, and the community around it attach an intangible culture aspect to it. Actually, sometimes multiple intangible connections. So why do we get a hydrologist from another continent to look at Lake Turkana? Why do we get an anthropologist to come from another continent to assess our sites? Some who, sorry to say, have not studied the communities to come up with viable solutions. This is a problem. Next year, in 2022, we celebrate 50 years of the World Heritage Convention. We therefore cherish its successes as well as take stock of its challenges. Some I have already outlined. The sustainability of the convention with treasures depends on the capacity of the convention to grow organically in its implementation. It cannot remain static. Likewise, the long-term sustainable protection and promotion of cultural and natural heritage sites will depend on the capacity for equally organic and holistic approaches to conservation. This calls for more experts from the region to participate in the evaluations and missions because they are live to the social economic realities of the region and can recommend viable solutions. There is need for an accepted space, enabling practices for protecting and promoting heritage sites to flow with the needs of the times. Of the most pressing issues regarding the implementation of the convention, one stands out, and that is what this session has been about: conservation. There is a need to collaborate and partner for research and creative and productive win-win solutions for properties in the region. For an improved sustainability of our heritage sites, for example, conservation will notably need to include 4 dimensions. Let me just outline them very quickly. 1, conservation in a manner that makes room for social economic development of the regions where the sites are situated. 2, conservation mitigating the impacts of climate change. 3, conservation incorporating the dynamic and changing times needs inherent to culture itself. Culture is not static. And 4, conservation giving priority to the unique local understanding, comprehension, and knowledge of heritage beyond a one-science approach to heritage. Thus, in the understanding of one size does not fit all, global approaches that provide space like this one, like what we are doing, and priority to local perspective, local understanding, and to local expertise in conserving one's own culture is very important. Furthermore, in view of the undeniable impact of inclement weather on sites and the importance of social economic development to provide for the health, education, and living rights of the populations in the regions where the sites are located, and to move what seems to be a tug of war between discourses on conservation versus development, it shouldn't be. We need to invest more in the nexus between conservation and social economic development. It is not a war. And look collectively for innovative and inventive solutions. As mentioned before, one size does not fit all, please. Thus, all countries do not experience the same level of development needs or pressures. So the question for our varied global approaches becomes, how do we marry conservation and social economic development? How do we ensure a solid materials, values, and peoples-based approach to the conservation of sites? In what ways do we ensure we do not remain in a conventional view of conservation, of maintaining the past at all costs, pristine, versus addressing the issues of the present while engaging the future? For the survival and benefit of humanity, this paradigm shift is essential. Social economic development and climate change mitigation, for example, when addressed, contribute to regional stability and peace, which is a much needed ingredient for the protection of World Heritage Site. Culture itself is created by communities and likewise is maintained by communities. The depth of local and indigenous community engagement within sites creates a living symbiosis with the cultural and natural sites, which we have noticed tends to determine how well the site thrives and its level of maintenance. In Kenya, for example—
Your Excellency, I'm so sorry, just it's 11.5 minutes, just
1 minute, just 1 minute.
Okay.
Thank you. Community, therefore, involvement with sites underscores the need to privilege a community's cultural systems, knowledge, and expertise over universal concepts of heritage. Finally, on the politicization of the committee, which is a very popular topic, countries are not feeling heard. So when countries don't feel heard, they explain their positions to each other. I have seen very disgusting allegations that countries are paid to take the positions they do. Countries listen to science. It is important that the balance between conservation and development is held sacrosanct. That is the way I see us moving together towards development and conservation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm awed personally, and I don't know how to respond, but it's so valuable to hear your perspective and so passionate, and a little bit of strong opinions we can take. So it's good to have a bit of these, strong points. And thank you so much for all these reflections. And especially I'd like to appreciate the way that you remind us local communities know what to do. And we're talking about global cooperation, but maybe we're sometimes missing a piece. Start with the local, and not, when we don't have enough of the local components, these parachuted in, transplanted expertise, they will fall short of real solutions. So sustainability is to be localized. So that and many other reflections, thank you for your contribution. Now, moving along in the World Heritage System, we have our advisory bodies with us, and representing ICOMOS, the International Council on Monuments and Sites, we have our next panelists, also our dear friend Gabriel Caballero, who has started his term as the focal point for the Sustainable Development Goals at ICOMOS at the start of 2021. And it's been an intense and fast and youthful, dynamic period with Gabe, which I witnessed as being part of the SDGs working group, working with him. A lot of the ICOMOS SDGs working group concerns and scope of work overlaps with our World Heritage Sustainability. So we're very fortunate to have this conversation through Gabe between ICOMOS and our World Heritage. He acts as facilitator and coordinator for ICOMOS's work in relation to the global sustainable development policy arena, coordinating the activities of the working group, developing ideas to support the implementation of the ICOMOS action plan for localizing the SDGs. He's an expert of the ICOMOS Committee on Cultural Landscapes. He's also an active landscape architect. I know that he's also working on many landscape projects on the ground in Singapore, where he hails from today. Well, he hails from the Philippines, but he's based in Singapore. I know all these insider informations about Gabe that is not written here. And he's it's nearing midnight over there. So thank you for staying up so late for us, Gabe, today. And I will leave the floor to you to share some reflections from ICOMOS. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ege. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Clear? Okay, so I really appreciate our conversation today. I think this is the fourth time that I've been here in different discussions, and I've been seeing the evolution of the discussions. Thank you for inviting me, and I appreciated actually what Lucia has provided us in the beginning, which provided the methods of what has been created. And I think it is really good that the different kinds of local actions have been highlighted, and the methodologies, as what you said, are transparent and they're quite clear, and good practices are highlighted. I see now when the questions came out that how can the document, or how can these experiences come back to the World Heritage Committee later on? In another place in the UN high-level political forum, what we have is voluntary national reviews and voluntary local reviews. And I see this kind of conversation as a voluntary local review, that these are opinions of everyone from the local representatives, that they're not necessarily the national perspectives. But the VLRs are not part of UNESCO's World Heritage Convention, right? So how do we put that in? It's, well, the main answer is putting it in the operational guidelines and putting it as part of real documentation and real processes for World Heritage. That takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. If you if you know what's happening in the World Heritage Committee meeting this round, there's this item 12, which is discussing the changes in the operational guidelines. Now, one of the things that I saw also in the 16th is that I mentioned outstanding universal value as the core, right? And I do think that some of our speakers today mentioned about outstanding universal value, which is great. And that is the foundation of management systems and frameworks and decision making. But we also know that our sites, this World Heritage Convention, the 1972 convention, is a 50-year-old convention. And we've had built this mega framework that has allowed it to change, allowed it to transform, but in a little bit slowly than what we would expect. And I think that it is up to us to, not just ICOMOS, IUCN, and ICROM, but every one of us to be part of this discussion, but in a different way. And I'll go to that later on. It was also highlighted today that, as Her Excellency has provided also, that I think she's correct here, that this is a global melting pot. Last time I was thinking this as a triangle of local, regional, and global. But if we see this as a culmination of different ideas where we highlight different kinds of good practices, then it is a good platform to really discuss those things. What I do remember from our on the 16th, and Susan is here, is that site that they have discussed in North America, which is the Pimachowin Aki World Heritage. And I really appreciated that because it went to great detail. And I went back. Oh, sorry. I went back to look at the. Oh, my light suddenly died on me. Okay, sorry. Hold on. But what I was saying is that the site that that site, I read the outstanding universal value, and it is reflecting back to the cultural tradition of the Jiganawa Wendamang Gidakimi Naan, which is keeping the land. So in terms of that whole perspective of sustainability, it is embedded, sustainability is embedded in the outstanding universal value, which allows that kind of environmental sustainability to be embedded in the discussions, that indigenous people lead that conversation. There's this social multi-level, multi-sectoral, non-hierarchical decision-making process that is embedded in kinship models. So I think these are good practices that we should highlight, that if the OUV reflects a certain kind of sustainable practice, then we should anchor our perspectives in that. And then I also really like the idea that, you know, for that discussion on North America, we synthesized one site, and it was a deeper discussion, a deeper reflection of what can be done. Now, well, at this time, I also have another critique, which is quite interesting here. We have been discussing about sustainable development and sustainable development goals, but we in this platform, we actually looked at sustainable development and in the framework of World Heritage, so WHSDP, right? Which is only dividing the sustainable development into 4 dimensions. Not a lot of people actually looked at sustainable development goals, the 17 sustainable development goals, which is much more detailed. And I did see the questions that you've had in the questionnaire. It is general topics of the sustainable development, which is good. So I think the lens of World Heritage is really focused on these 4 dimensions. And the question to us is that, do we need to focus on the 17 SDGs or the 4 dimensions of World Heritage and sustainable development? So that's a question for everyone to mull upon. Now, here in the meetings of 44Com, I know that you've seen a lot of these various sites that have been discussed that has this potential conflicts of outstanding universal value and development. I will not go to the detail of these things, but what I do want to highlight is that the power of choice, the power of decisions actually come not in the science, not in the advisory bodies, not in UNESCO, but the 21 states that define what the decisions are. So I think what we need, and I come back to the local actions, if we really want to engage and we really want to talk about sustainable development, then I think the right people to discuss with are the people that are the 21 decision makers that we are talking with. So if you have colleagues or you have, let's say, representation to the World Heritage Committee, I think similar to what the BLRs do, engaging with those people who are the right decision makers should be the way to do that. I think that is the power that we can create for civil society to reach out to the decision makers in the World Heritage Committee. Last one is that I highlight again that local actions are important and much more important than global perspectives. So I do share the thoughts that a lot of our colleagues have said today, that we should capture all these things and put it out there and really showcase the best things that are out there for World Heritage sites and how to make them sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gabe. Really innovative points you've made, very much appreciated in terms of bringing us into even the bigger policy framework of sustainability. Thank you for reminding us of what goes on at the UN policy agenda. The progress review procedures at the UN are, as Gabe said, through the voluntary national and increasingly voluntary local review. So that's a recommendation perhaps for UNESCO to connect into more UN instruments. Maybe this is related to the general issue we talk about silos and how to take heritage out of silos. And so policy instruments are also to think about. And as you were concluding, I was just checking out who are the 21 decision makers at the moment. Do we have Kenya among them? Not this year, I believe. So we have Her Excellency. You used to be at the committee a couple of years ago, and you just finished your term as Kenya, I believe. So unfortunately, we don't have any of those 21 decision makers, but that doesn't mean that the stakeholders governance ecosystem is not worthwhile to debate with. And next time Kenya is on the board, hopefully Ambassador remembers our conversations today. But there are many mechanisms of actually communicating advocacy. And also, thank you very much for bringing to the fore the relations of the 17 goals, Gabe. I'd like to add at this point that ICOMOS, we've been working together at ICOMOS with Gabe on an SDGs policy guidance, where we have looked at the heritage and sustainability through the 17 global goals. We can share the link to that policy guidance later on in the chat box. I think there are opportunities to synergize between these processes, these tools. So things for us to note for the future. So without more, I will go on to share our screen for our next panelist from the advisory bodies. Today we have Mr. Dr. Nabih Ghazal Aswad, who is hailing from the Syrian Conservation Society for the Conservation of Wildlife. They are also a member of BirdLife International and in turn a member of the IUCN network. So we have by proxy an IUCN representative with us, and it's very valuable to have a natural heritage expert. We tend to gravitate toward cultural very often, and it's the culture-nature connection, of course, is important to discuss. So he graduated from the University of Nottingham. He's currently conservation officer at BirdLife Middle East in Amman, Jordan, coordinating the conservation and awareness activities of the EU Life Egyptian Vulture New Life project. I think we see the Egyptian vulture behind him in his picture over there. He's a member of the IUCN World Commission on Protected Areas, expert assessment group for the Green List in the Middle East, Arabian Peninsula, and plant specialist groups, and other administrative and professional roles that I will not read out now for time purposes. So welcome, Dr. Nabih. Thank you very much for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Thank you very much.
Yes.
So I wouldn't take a long time just to dwell on or just reflect on this point, but listening to what has been said for the presentation with Lucia, first of all, and she's covered a lot of information, which is brilliant. And then hearing the interpretation and the introduction and the discussion presented by the others. Nonetheless, I want just to stress on some point. Her Excellency Ambassador Helen had pointed out for a very, very important point. And it is, I'm speechless I won't salute her for the valuable information that she presented. I would say that implementing on talking about the local importance of the attribute of the heritage site, it is important. So all we consider the heritage site as a local, but we don't adopt it. We have to adopt it more stress on this application, just to consider the site on the local attributes. But we have just to cooperate as well on the regional and the global level, just to reflect and learn from each other. So the sites can learn from each other. So we can't stand alone as a site in X country or Y country without having some knowledge from that's being gained by other sites, other communities, other national sites. So we have just to as well to consider one of the points that's being said yearly, that the sites has to be considered for their cultural perspective as well as for their national perspective. and on mixed site. So we can't consider that site is considered as a culture only, but the root of that culture has depended in some aspect on that natural attribute on the site itself and the human factor that's been giving and building on knowledge by the local communities to get some advance on that conservation. So conservation would rely only on this human knowledge that being gained over the history from using that natural history, natural biological information, and some ecological information. So it is kind of important just to consider the conservation as aspect of all, as a formula. That's all these aspects contribute to this formula, and we can implement or improve the situation for the site in the future. And that will be mainly, as Gabby has said, we have to reflect on the SDGs dearly and choose rightly how to complement and how to use all these SDGs in the right way to the benefit of the site and the benefit of conservation of this site. We can speak a lot of, as IUCN experts, we in the criteria when IUCN adopt for adopting or declaring a site as an important area or a protected area, it's one of the site or criteria of the 7th criteria. It's important as a heritage, for its heritage, for biological aspect and for cultural aspect. So we have to consider that dearly, that it is a very important information that to merge and take all biodiversity aspect into the conservation action for cultural site as well. So as you said, Ishan, on the project that I'm coordinating in the Middle East, the Egyptian Vulture Ulife project. This project is looking at one of the species that is been endangered and it's been declining rapidly during the last 3-4 decades. And the population has declined by more than 90% over the last decades. So why it was thriving in the past, but now it is declining? It's mainly when we look at the site where these species are migrating between the Balkan into the Middle East, into Africa. Birds are breeding in the Balkan and then wintering into Africa, into the Eastern Africa and Western Africa, into the Sahara, in different countries. So it was thriving there, but the advance of like the technologies, advance of like the inhumane aspect of dealing with this bird, some of the selfishness of the pupil of the human. Okay, we have to consider about ourselves and regardless of the need of the bird have caused that decline of the bird. One of the declines can attribute it to the advance of science to make some medicine for the veterinarians for the animal in the farms. That medicine contribute to the decline or cause fatal threats to the bird. So we have, when we advance in science, we have to look at other aspects as well. So we don't have to advance in agricultural aspect and relieve and let alone the natural aspect or wildlife, and from that consideration, we have to merge them all together and put them in one place. So we learned that this bird was thriving through the scripts of the ancient Egyptian, that the bird was there and was looking as giving some symbol about prosperity, about the wisdom, about the mother of giving nature something back. So doing some kind of anthropological studies, looking at what these old civilization, what the culture, what the folklore of these people in the Middle East, in Africa, in the Balkan, they consider about that bird, that gives us some insight about the protection of the how to conserve or how to use this knowledge that been deep rooted in the heritage just to conserve these species. And we learned a lot from the studies of some experts on the anthropological studies from different parts of the study. So I would say that we have to, if we want to win, if we have to go and advance in protection and conservation, in our cultural protection, we have to merge all these aspects together in one aspect, just to make it more global, more local in the same time. I would say not global only or not local only. It's have to be all in the same time, just to look at all the ways and all means that we can use for implementation and conservation. I wouldn't go for long time to speak because that has been said by all my respected fellow panelists in this meeting. I would thank you for this opportunity, but I would say we have to consider all these aspects just to benefit the protection. If we benefit the cultural aspect, we will benefit the biological aspect and ecological aspect, and vice versa. If we do some aspect for benefit and advance our ecological aspect, we will benefit our cultural aspect as well. And that's, I would stop in here, and I'm happy just to go later on just to put some idea if needed. Thank you very much indeed for having me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nabe. Very valuable reminder about how culture-nature connection works really on the ground. If you forget one side of the equation, the other side damages that side. You just gave an example on how the wildlife is affected by the medicine. A good example for us to think about. Everything is interconnected, and as a nature person, you're reminding us of that circle in the World Heritage Emblem. Remember, the circle represents nature and the diamond represents culture, and they need to be holistically global and local, also interconnected. So thank you so much for these reflections. And now we are moving on to our last panelist. Last but not least, of course, is our dear Rohit Jigyasu. I will just share the screen for his bio for you here. Rohit is also a very active member of ICOMOS, both in the SDGs working group, but also he's been serving on the board of ICOMOS International. And we had the pleasure of the ICOMOS General Assembly in New Delhi, India in 2017, where the outcome was the Declaration on Heritage and Democracy. So that was a valuable time to discuss democracy in the largest democracy in the world, India. Rohit is a conservation architect and risk management professional from India, currently working at ICROM as project manager on urban heritage, climate change, and disaster risk management. He served as the UNESCO chairholder at the Institute for Disaster Mitigation at Ritsumeikan University, Kyoto, Japan. And he has been instrumental in developing the international training course that we hear about often, very active, very well attended, acclaimed course. He was the president of ICOMOS India in the past years. As I said, also in executive committee of ICOMOS International. Now one of his many hats is ICROM today for us as advisory body, specializing especially in technical capacity building. I would take the liberty to say, but Rohit, you can correct me or add and reflect for us. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ege. Thank you for your very generous introduction. So I would like to respond to the question that you posed, how useful can such a case study project be for advancing implementation of World Heritage and Sustainable Development Policy and conservation, especially in the context of the committee that is currently taking place. So I'll try to respond to this challenging question you have posed, and I will like to first of all make one very important clarification in the light of what is being said until now. I think this whole question of criticizing that the convention is becoming political or moving to from something else to being more political is a little bit of a, I don't think this is a question that makes any sense. Why? Because convention in its own sense is political in nature. You know, when member states are party to something and they agree on something, it is essentially political, and there are going to be political challenges which are going to come in when we think about convention. But I want to take the conversation from that convention to something more generic, which is, why is World Heritage important for us? Is it important for us just because it is part of convention, or is it important for us because it has something more for us to contribute? And I think World Heritage has to be seen not just as a trophy by someone, getting nominated means that he or the country has a trophy, but it is something which is an example. It is a flagship which can show us what are the good practices for heritage conservation and management. By being recognized as World Heritage, we have excellent opportunity to show to the world what it means to be a heritage which is recognized and protected and managed in a nice way, in a sustainable way. And when we talk about sustainability in this context, I think these case studies give us an excellent platform to show to us how this can be achieved. And how this can be achieved in the context of sustainable development has to be seen in three different ways. One is how heritage can contribute to sustainability. So there is one important way in which these case studies can demonstrate how heritage itself contributes to sustainability. I think the second thing is, what do we mean by sustainable heritage conservation? What does it mean to conserve in a sustainable manner? When we take into account all the parameters, where are our conservation and management approaches really sensitive to the aspect of economic sustainability, social sustainability. So all those, from the point of view of actual conservation and management, how sustainable are we? And thirdly is an important point which has also been raised earlier, and that is, how do we reconcile heritage conservation and sustainable development? These are three different points where sustainability and heritage have different kind of relationships, and we need to kind of investigate them. And I feel that the beauty of these case studies is that they bring out what it means to really achieve these three different elements. Now, I want to come to the other point. When we say that World Heritage is not just a trophy in itself, it is also an example for countries to show what it means to actually conserve or manage heritage sites. I would say that OUV is not something which is sitting on a pedestal without any larger sets of values that really hold these OUVs. So I think there's a problem when we try to separate OUV from these larger contextual values, which are probably more important to the communities than what we define as something which is outstanding and universal. So I think we really need to move away from this, how do you say, kind of cutting out OUV from the rest of the values. And when we think about heritage and sustainability, I think this is an excellent opportunity for us to reconnect the OUV to these larger sets of values and see how we can really, and that is the only way these will be accepted. And, because the moment let's accept that OUV is a criteria which is defined for a certain convention, but in reality, on the ground, OUV is not existing because of the convention. It is existing because of these larger sets of values which are held by the communities and by the other stakeholders. So we need to really make that connection, and I hope that these case studies can really help in demonstrating how OUVs connect to these larger sets of values, and how do these larger sets of values actually sustain OUVs, because it's also the question of sustaining OUV itself, and these larger sets of values actually sustain OUVs. The other point I also wanted to make here is the point of, it's very interesting to really hear, and in the first presentation, it was brought out, the environmental sustainability, inclusive social development, economic and peace, security. And yes, we need to look at all these different 4 pillars of sustainability. But I would say that it would not be justifiable to kind of evaluate any site by doing a sum total of all these sustainabilities. It is not that you achieve economic sustainability and you need to have all the 4 dimensions achieved together. So sometimes I feel that separating them into 4 different pillars can be also a challenge. And if these case studies can bring out how these 4 actually connect with each other. You see, if economic sustainability is very much linked to social, and social is very much connected to environmental in many different ways. So the interdependencies of these different dimensions of sustainability is also very important for us to show, because I feel, and I will like to kind of say this very categorically, sustainability has become a kind of rhetoric. We talk big, we say many big things, but what does it really mean on ground has to be demonstrated through, as somebody else also mentioned, in a more holistic sense, rather than always categorizing them and making them different for different categories is not going to help us. So I think with these case studies, I hope that we are able to show these connections between these different elements or different aspects of sustainability. I also wanted to mention that we need to move our discourse from nomination to what happens after nomination. And that's where I feel we need to put a lot more emphasis. Yes, it is important to have regional balance, and we need to move towards that. We need to have more sites from underrepresented countries. There is no doubt about that. But I feel like, and this is Ikram's strong kind of I would say push as well, that once we have the sites on the list, what are we going to do about it so that these, it's not a question of being on the danger list, but it's the question of being responsible towards maintaining the site that we have already put on the list. What do we do in terms of building the skills and capacities of the people once who are responsible for managing them? What do we do in terms of really making sure that all the stakeholders are really brought on the same plane, and it's not about just being the responsibility of the government, because it is simply on the list. So it's all about the government. So how do we bring all these stakeholders together, and how do we work across multiple jurisdictions? I'm closing now.
8.5 minutes. Okay.
I'm closing now. So how do we work across multiple jurisdictions as well? Because that's also important. It's not about just core area or the buffer area. It is also about working across different zones. And I hope these case studies can definitely show how they can work, not just within what you demarcate as World Heritage, but link it to the wider context as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Apologies, I had to cut you off, Rohit. Everything you say is a world in itself. So thank you so much for your reflections, and thank you for really emphasizing the concept of responsibility and the larger sets of values that we're trying to sustain. So really great insights. And now with Rohit, we have gone through our panelist list, and unfortunately we are a little behind time. It's already the hour almost, and we were going to have some Q&A time. I'm going to pass the floor to Jana to comment on whether or not we have some questions. I think we can go over time a bit, some 15 minutes, I believe. So I hope that you can stay with us, because we have Ruben's closing remarks coming up as well. But first, let's see, Jana, how are we with questions?
Yeah, thanks, Ege. We have a comment and a question, and a part comment, part question from Albino in the chat box. And he writes that, would you like me to read it, or why don't you go? Would you like me to read it?
Albino is actually a panelist with us today.
Why don't we, we allow him to speak, yeah.
Hi, good evening, and thank you for this really great panel with so many insightful and thought-provoking issues that were raised. I was just wondering that, I mean, from listening to the different presentations, one cannot help noticing that there are a number of really good proposals that, and some of them have been in some form, so like made before. And I'm just wondering, from your own experiences and from the regions that you're familiar with, why do you think that up to today we are not, I mean, almost 50 years into the convention, we are not yet seeing those good practices as the mainstream? There remain the exceptions that one has to look very closely to them, while some of those, the premises and that have been put forward, and some of the good practices that you have also shown in your cases, I mean, they are there. So I was just wondering if one would want to reflect a little bit about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Albino. Really critical point indeed. What is the real picture? We have good case studies, we have problematic ones, and what is the real prevalence or proportion of this? But anyway, before taking up any more time, I'd like to ask if any of our panelists would like to volunteer for any response to Albino's question. Alessio, please.
Yes, thank you. I'll be very short, because when I was reading this question, I was thinking that's a good one. I mean, in my experience, in my little experience, all cases are problematic. Some are less problematic than others. I'm getting convinced, I don't have a full answer, but I'm getting convinced that one critical point is what somehow also Rohit was stressing. It's about what comes after the nomination. In the cases which I know, namely especially the Italian ones, but not only, there is this misunderstanding. To me, is a misunderstanding. Nomination is a knowledge process, OUV, etc. Management, so what comes after that we normally tend to call management, simplify, is something different, is on a different page. Let me provoke, of course I'm provoking, but management is not about outstanding universal value. We manage a World Heritage Site because there is a World Heritage Site, so obviously there is an outstanding universal value. It's not, management is not about this. And management, let me provoke again, once more, is not about conservation. Of course, we need to conserve heritage. Otherwise, what do we have to manage if we don't conserve? So I see that in the cases which I know directly from my direct experience, there is always this misunderstanding, as if what comes after is a sort of second step of the nomination process. To me, it's not. And this creates a lot of troubles, because same people, same approach, same breaks on. And this makes, in many cases, to me, the word sustainability, sustainable management, sustainable heritage management becomes the rhetoric that some of us was also stressing. This is my point. I don't know if you agree or not, but I think it's good to pose real questions.
A real answer from Alessio to real questions. Maybe one can think of how the OUV has these three pillars as defined in the directives, you know, the criteria, the integrity and authenticity, and then protection and management. I mean, the way the system is technically structured, you're supposed to have conservation or protection and management as part of OUV, but maybe this is another issue that going forward, the convention has to question if it's going to grow organically, as Ambassador said, who knows. But thank you for the provocation. It's what we need, so great. Anybody else would like to share any ideas or comments on this good versus problematic kind of paradigm, or anything else we should provoke and question today about the World Heritage Convention implementation process? I think today people are very much into listening. I think it was very engrossing. We don't have too many questions, but oh, Susan, I think you have something to add.
Yeah, I think, well, I just want to try and answer the good versus whatever. I don't know if we should use that kind of moralistic language, but whatever, about case studies, but with the thought about some of the lessons again from Pimacho and Aki, where the nomination was very long and led to debates within the World Heritage Committee that were considered very important, because the indigenous communities were questioning a Seinen universal value, and overall there were ways that they saw their values that, I mean, I wasn't there, I just know from reading, that forced some kinds of discussions. And I think that maybe that's actually a good thing in some ways when a nomination is more difficult. It created a period of time for a lot of reflection within the leading parties, the stakeholders, to think about what they really wanted and what they would need to achieve through doing this. Because as you know, from if those of you that saw the presentation about they have a very unusual context of governance between four indigenous nations and First Nations and 2 provinces. And even in the Canadian context, that's, you know, usually it's Parks Canada, national government proposal, and, you know, that's it. And so I would just say that it takes, I guess there's a time factor in my answer, that, you know, for something to make a big change, it takes a long time for it to actually come into being as a World Heritage Site.
Thank you very much, Susan. A lot to learn from the indigenous, and the longer and more difficult, maybe the better prepared. Yeah. Gabe, you have your hand up, I believe.
Yes, I think the idea, I just wanted to respond to Alessio's point that the OUV is not the main important thing, because I think it is really important to go back to what we all believe in, because the convention relies on particular principles, and for the different sites or state parties, for those who believe in it, there is a reason why they want to put it in there, right? And why do we all, like, all these issues come up about what people has called as politicization, when a site is becoming part of site in danger, and the sites refuse to be part of the sites in danger because they believe that they are still very much like doing the right job. Why is there so much fight that happens there when if you don't believe that there is a principle that is behind World Heritage, and the management frameworks can be done in any way, I think that is not what conservation is. You know, conservation has to be coming from a principle of, you know, protecting something. Let's say if it's a natural site, I went back to and I don't want to refer to a certain discussion this time, but, you know, if we have a natural site that is like, has development pressures that are coming in, and, you know, the state party says, no, this is all okay. And, you know, a lot of things are happening that destroys that whole thing that they value. Isn't that a bad decision to begin with? So I think we need to have principles that keeps our, you know, heritage practice or our heritage thinking to a certain kind of belief system. Yeah, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Lots to think about OUV there. Any other comments from our panelists? Or any other questions? Jana, should we proceed to the next slot, or, oh, Juliana has her hand up, I think. Juliana.
Yes, and I will be very short. I think we speak a little bit too short about emotions and about ownership feelings, about really owning the heritage that we are speaking about. And when we are putting the heritage to a level that experts, they don't own the place, the locals own the place. They are the ones that did the heritage. They are the ones creating heritage. And even in natural heritage, they are the ones living within or around the heritage that we're speaking about. So, anchoring ownership feelings into the heritage management, I think is critical for a sustainable management of the site, because local methodologies are always adapted to the site that they are created on. So we need to listen, and of course we need to exchange, but we mainly need to listen to local methodologies and how local traditions have been dealing with their own heritage through the times, because the World Heritage List is now, it's a now list. No, it's a contemporary list. And most of the 1,000 and many sites that we are talking about, they exist for thousands of years, some of them, others just some generations, but still we have a relationship, a generational relationship with heritage that we need to see and we need to pay attention to.
Thank you very much, Juliana. Yes, it's really great that you pointed out the emotional and ownership aspect of things. It's all about human nature, absolutely. Okay, we need to look at time. We have a question from Pamela in the Q&A, right? Jana, sorry, I'm taking over from you.
Please, go ahead, yeah.
So shall we look at that question now?
Yeah, and do you want to give Pamela the power to speak, or should we? Should I just read it? Yeah, thinking that we're pressed with time.
Well, if we can make Pamela a panelist quickly, why not? I would say Pamela is a very active member of our team and a co-convener. If she's here, let's upgrade her to panelist.
We'll just allow her to talk.
Okay. She's here.
She's here? Yeah. Hi, Pamela.
Hello. I'm sorry for the background noise. I am in the train at the moment. But thank you very much for opening the mic for me. Yes, I think this is something in line with what has been discussed today. What are the outstanding universal values of the site? And I think that one of the main questions that arise during our whole process with our case study proponents across the world was the massification of tourism. It seems like there is a need for capacity building in that regard, because as soon as a site gets the acknowledgement, or yes, in the listing process, it seems to be, well, not only the acknowledgement, but also certification to become massively touristic. And what has been the outstanding universal values seem to be pushed to the background to have revenue take its place. So what could be the role of UNESCO? So we can put that in our recommendations and on the 30th of July this month. What could be the role of UNESCO to avoid this kind of situation?
Mm-hmm. And thank you. And Pamela, you've actually partly answered the question directly here, talking about capacity building. So thank you very much. Because of time, I don't think we can really go into depth about this, but I mean, it's a very important point to make. So now that we've noted it, I think one last question. Li Yuan had her hand up. So last slot, and then we go to Ruben for closing today. Please, Li Yuan.
Okay, thank you, H. And okay, I could quickly answer the the question. Yes, and maybe we could get some idea from the Colon Island and from the Ecuador. And the local government, they will depend and support by the foundation formed from the Germany and Canada, and the foundation will support the local people, and especially to the small younger people, and to how to say, get the education, and then they will, when they finish their education from the middle school or after university, and they will back to the colon Iceland and be a local manager. And so this will keep the local people's education quality, and also at the same time could let the local people to manage the local site. So maybe this will be a very, how to say, maybe a suggestion for Pamena's question. And also I will quickly follow the Alessio's the suggestion about just Alessio said that the conversation is not enough. Managing must keep on. And from the Guanas National Park in the Peru, and the in the downstream downtown, and the not only the flood and bring the dangers to the downtown of the near the Guanas, the natural heritage, but also the climate change and made the temperature higher, and then made the local people, and every year receive less wheat, less potato, and less corn. And this also another dangerous to come to the heritage site. So maybe the new challenge will coming and will come, and the management is very yes, like yes, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liwan. And it's great that you talked about younger people and investing in the future generation as part of capacity building, and climate, of course. And climate and youth come together with Fridays for Future and the movement. The young kids are very much aware and need to be supported. But anyway, we don't have too much time anymore. So thank you very much. Now I'm moving on to Ruben, please. If you can kindly provide some closing remarks for us before we close. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Elle. Queridos y simpáticos amigos, voy a tomar unos pocos minutos, muy pocos, empezando por una posición planteada por la embajadora Helen, que me pareció extraordinaria, cuando dice que tenemos que buscar alternativas, lo cual es una inconformidad necesaria para superar aspectos del pasado que ya han tenido su oportunidad. Y en este sentido voy a mencionar primero a un gran personaje de Unesco, Gonzalo Halfter, el ecólogo biólogo de México, cuando él dijo que la conservación tenía muchos frentes. El frente de conservar, pero también el de recuperar, también el de regenerar, palabra clave hoy para la sustentabilidad, y el de innovar. Sin innovación no hay conservación, han dicho muchos sabios de la historia y del presente. Y tenemos que tener, por lo tanto, una visión contextual donde el paisaje es el gran patrimonio. Esto ha sido muy notable a través de nuestro trabajo de todo el mes y de todos los meses precedentes. Todos quisieron titularse como una conservación del paisaje integral, y ya no solo del monumento. Y no voy a abundar sobre esto porque casi todos ya lo sabemos. Y en ese sentido también me pareció extraordinario lo que planteó Rohit, donde él en un momento dado llegó a decir algo demasiado importante. Dijo, salir de los valores universales para generar más oportunidades de sustentabilidad. La conservación como una gran meta de la sustentabilidad, y no solo la sustentabilidad como un agregado a la conservación. Valores más grandes, dijo Rohit. Y ahora, en la última intervención de Strogan, de Juliera, fue también gentileste, es decir, sentimientos de pertenencia como un valor para una nueva conservación, y no solamente lo que algún experto, valiosos naturalmente, muy valiosos, a veces titulan como el monumento únicamente. Entonces, avanzando y ya terminando, lo voy a hacer muy breve, quiero decir primero que me enorgullezco de trabajar con Unesco desde 1978. Empecé desde lo natural, siendo yo arquitecto, y luego fui avanzando a lo cultural, a lo intangible, a las ciudades y finalmente al paisaje urbano histórico, como propone uno de nuestros líderes, Francesco Bandarín. Porque en eso aparecen nociones globales. Si no tenemos 4, 5, 6 nociones globales que nos integren, esto va a ser muy difícil. Va a ser muy difícil. No es lo peculiar lo que nos va a distinguir, sino lo esencial, los criterios de la visión global. Y en este sentido, yo quiero rescatar lo que para mí, de todo este proceso magnífico de OWH, en el cual me enorgullezco tener compañeros tan destacados y con los cuales siento tanta empatía. Yo creo que hay que poner el acento en que el patrimonio tiene que ser un proceso evolutivo y no la congelación museológica. Esto es muy duro lo que estoy diciendo, yo sé lo que estoy diciendo. He contribuido a crear varios patrimonios mundiales, muchas reservas de la biosfera y otros valores intangibles, como el gaucho de las pampas sudamericanas. Esto, para que se entienda el patrimonio evolutivo, tenemos que entender el patrimonio inserto en un paisaje, o sea, en una visión holística. Palabra clave que por aquí anoté, que dijo no me acuerdo quién, pero que es fundamental, todos sabemos que es fundamental. Tenemos que integrar ciudad y territorio, esto ya no puede ser. La ciudad es parte de un patrimonio territorial. ¿Podemos separar Florencia de Toscana? ¿Podemos separar la ciudad de Arequipa de la campiña de Arequipa? Imposible. Un sentimiento no holístico, anterior. Tenemos que tener participación, porque como bien dijo Juliana al final, sin sentido de pertenencia al patrimonio son piedras secas. Y tenemos que tener planificación y no solo academicismo, planificación de expertos, planificación de ONGs, planificación de gestores locales. Y tenemos que tener, por último, comprensión de que el patrimonio es un lenguaje que explica la historia, más que un lenguaje que se explica a sí mismo. Y por lo tanto, todos tienen que empezar a ser gestores del patrimonio, porque sería uno de los lenguajes más inclusivos. Un honor haber estado acá. Gracias, Elle, por todo tu apoyo. Gracias a los Michael, a los Francesco, a los tantos magníficos exponentes de mi generación, o casi de mi generación, que también pueden explicar cómo los más jóvenes han llegado a avanzar más aún. Muchísimas gracias.
So wonderful closing remarks. Everybody is congratulating and I'm happy with the session. I can tell from the faces. What an honor to be the one wrapping up. It's really been very rich and very lively discussion. And Ruben, wonderful words to leave us with, to take away after, to think about. So I think we are tired now, so maybe we should quickly move to closing. Lucia has kindly shared some links for our other events coming up until the end of the month. We do have a youth forum and other events next weekend, and also our World Heritage Voices. Ruben just mentioned Francesco and Mike, our elders who have been pushing for this new platform to share more opinions and voices. Please do check it out. So in closing, have a wonderful day and evening, everybody, and we'll be in touch. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Great job. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank
You
you
too.
very much.